What's going on, everybody? It's the Bulls Show, aka Aidan, and welcome back to another video. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to play Keep, Waive, or Trade. I've done this quite a few times throughout the YouTube journey that I've been on, a couple of episodes here and there, mainly done in the off season and before the trade deadline. So we're going to be talking and taking a deeper dive into all of these things, and I guess discussing whether I would personally keep a player, waive a player, or trade a player, and ultimately with contracts expiring as well, we will have another option that will just be let them go. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really fit the name, does it? So before we get started, please like and subscribe to the Bulls Show, turn notifications on, and let me know in the comments below your thoughts about the Chicago Bulls and whether or not you agree or disagree with the things that I have to say about every single one of these guys, whether I'd keep them, waive them, trade them, or just let them go in general if their contract is expiring. So I'm going to come into this video assuming that everybody wants to stay on this Chicago Bulls team. As much as they're probably trade rumors that we're going to be talking about, obviously the big Zach LaVine discussion as well, I'm assuming that everybody is going to stay on the Chicago Bulls team, and it'll be up to me if I want to personally keep those players, waive those players, or trade those players. So feel free to let me know in the comments below. It's one of my favorite videos to do every single year, twice a year. It's amazing, in my opinion, to do these types of videos, and I guess it brings more broader discussions for everybody to have their own say on the Chicago Bulls situation, or whether you'd keep these players or do something else. That would be very intriguing to see. First, we're going to start with Tyler Cook. Now, Tyler Cook has always been a surprising player in my opinion, because at the time that he did get signed on for the Chicago Bulls, I felt that that was a very questionable move that the Bulls decided to do. And I've always said that I didn't see what other people may have saw in Tyler Cook, and I feel like a lot of people didn't see what others may have saw when it comes to Tyler Cook. It's one of those players that I just simply didn't know too much about. But throughout the season, I think he's done okay. And again, as a two-way player, it's a low-risk, high-reward type of player when it comes to Tyler Cook, because he's 24 years old. He has the ability to get a little bit better in terms of his NBA career, and he could potentially do a job for us here or there, and he has the physicality, in my opinion, to still play in this league as a role player if he does develop his game a little bit more. So I would say I'd like to keep Tyler Cook, and let's just see what he could do in terms of development next year. And that's probably going to be the final year, in my opinion, that I'd give to Tyler Cook. If he doesn't really I guess shine in that two-way contract, we do have younger players that we could be looking at in that situation. Again, a guy that I'll never forget, and maybe should get an opportunity somewhere down the line, I know many people probably forgot about this guy, is Troy Baxter Jr. He's another guy that I really think could potentially get an option anywhere in the league, and I think his athleticism will speak for itself as well. So I'd give one more year to Tyler Cook, but again, if he doesn't grasp that opportunity, I think that two-way contract could easily be given to somebody else. So it's up to him then in order to develop his, I guess, his own career. Tony Bradley, ladies and gentlemen, he's on I think a player option for the Chicago Bulls. Again, I'm assuming everybody wants to stay here, so I'm assuming Tony Bradley will accept his player option with this team. And in my personal opinion, I would keep Tony Bradley, because I think he has the potential to be a very good third option center. And in terms of a backup center, I think we need to look elsewhere. I don't think Tony Bradley has shown he was good enough to play as the backup center for the Chicago Bulls, whether it's injuries or not really making the most out of the games that he played. I can't put it down to one thing, and I'm sure Tony Bradley will know more about his own career than what I would, so I would take his word over anybody else's. But all that being said, as a third option center, he's done that for the majority of his career, in my opinion. He's done that with Philly, he's done that with Utah, and I think he's very good in that role. And he can be a guy that, again, developing his mid-range game later on in the season, he could be a guy that can come in for 2 to 5 minutes, get you a couple of scoring opportunities, get you some shots that teams won't guard, and maybe be able to be a guy that could get a couple of rebounds as well. In my opinion, he's capable of doing that, and he's on a very low contract as well. So again, low risk, high reward for Tony Bradley. I'd personally like to keep him on this team. If there is a trade package available, and of course Tony Bradley has to be the fall guy as well, I'm all for that as well. But I do think there are other guys on this team who could probably take that position, and I'd like to see what Tony Bradley can do. Malcolm Hill is next, ladies and gentlemen. Now, personally, I would most likely waive Malcolm Hill. No disrespect to him whatsoever, in all honesty. I just don't think he's going to be given any sort of game time outside of the other guys that we have. Again, we have so many guards on this team, and assuming everybody's going to stay on this team next season as well, we're going to have a very similar team. Where does Malcolm Hill get his opportunities? I also feel like there are a couple of guys you might want to consider replacing Malcolm Hill with as well. He's one of those guys that came in, I think he played for the Hawks first. He had a good game against us with the Atlanta Hawks. Came into this Chicago Bulls team, had a couple of good games here and there, but ultimately just wasn't getting playing time. And I think there could be better options out there more than Malcolm Hill, in all honesty. So I would like to waive Malcolm Hill. I don't think he has trade value, so there's no point in, I guess, putting that in discussions. Marko Simonovic, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, this is obviously an easy decision to keep. He's a rookie type of player. He's going to enter his second year next year for the Chicago Bulls. Played in the G League and had an outstanding G League run, in my opinion. Does need to add a little bit of weight on him. Does need to maybe get a little bit more physical in order to play in the league. But with all things being said, the opportunity has to be there for a guy like Marko Simonovic. So it's one of those situations where I'd give him one more year. But if this is the year where Billy Donovan says he's not ready, the coaching staff doesn't believe he's ready, the front office doesn't believe he's ready, and he's spending another year in the G League where he's getting little to no opportunities in the NBA, then you start to, again, we have a lot of roster spots that are being filled at the moment, and you have to look at some of those guys to say, can that position be used for a better player? And that's something you're going to have to look at deep down. If Marko Simonovic can't really break into the team next year, maybe those opportunities will be limited for a long period of time. Maybe this team is not the right team for him. But that's something we'll have to discuss a years down the line, because this year, I'd personally love to keep Marko Simonovic and just hope there's an opportunity available for him once he returns. Derrick Jones Jr., his contract is expiring for the Chicago Bulls this year. He will be an unrestricted free agent in the offseason. And in all honesty, again, assuming everybody wants to stay here, if Derrick Jones says he wants to re-sign with the Chicago Bulls in this hypothetical scenario, I would like to keep Derrick Jones Jr. Now, I know there are a lot of people that say that's unlikely, and at the end of the day, it very much is unlikely for Derrick Jones Jr. to stay on the Chicago Bulls. But in my opinion, he does offer us a little bit more than other guys on this team that I'll be talking about a little bit later. It's just one of those situations where I'd prefer him over some other guys, but at the end of the day, the unlikeliness of this is happening is probably a very realistic chance. I don't think he's going to come back for the Chicago Bulls, but if I had that opportunity and he wanted to be here, I would personally like to keep him and use him a little bit more and use him to the style that he can be accustomed to as well. I don't want to see a small ball lineup of Derrick Jones Jr. as the center. I think that's way too small in my opinion. We have to go with bigger options in that lineup. If you want to use a small ball, use a guy that's at least 6'9", 6'10". Use a guy that could probably be a little bit mobile and switch positions a lot more. Derrick Jones Jr. is not that guy. He's short. He's a lot shorter than most small ball centers out there in the NBA. So we have to use him better if we're going to keep him here as well. Troy Brown Jr. is next. I believe Troy Brown Jr. has a player option on his contract as well. And again, if I'm keeping Derrick Jones Jr., I wouldn't mind trading Troy Brown Jr. I've always said this at the end of the day. If I had to pick between the two players, I would personally keep Derrick Jones Jr. and I would trade Troy Brown Jr. But it looks like the roles could potentially be reversed in reality. The reality is it's unlikely that Derrick Jones Jr. is going to stay. And if that's going to be the case, I would like to keep Troy Brown Jr. In my opinion, there's very little differences between the two. It's a fine line because they do play similar positions. They are both very hard-working players. They're both going to be guys that comes in and out of the rotation from time to time, in my opinion. At the end of the day, I would like to keep one of them on this team. If you had to give me a choice, I'd pick Derrick Jones Jr., but I'm more than happy to take Troy Brown Jr. on as well. But hypothetically, I'd probably say it's time for Troy Brown Jr. to move on. It's for his own career as well. Again, he's a very young player and he needs opportunities. And being around a winning environment is going to be very good for him, but he has to get minutes on a winning environment as well. That's the best he could possibly get. And he's just not getting the minutes on the Chicago Bulls. But if one of them's going to leave, maybe Troy Brown can get those minutes this season. Next, we're going to talk about Matt Thomas. I personally would waive Matt Thomas, in all honesty. I'm not sure about his contract situation. I don't actually remember it that well. But from my understanding, Matt Thomas, again, the 15th man on the rotation, I basically said is an emergency signing and is an emergency player. He's a player that comes in and can do a job for the Chicago Bulls if other players are injured. But I do feel like we could get better out of that 15th man as well for the Chicago Bulls. It's not the worst thing in the world to keep Matt Thomas. I personally think if you could build a team that revolves around three-point shooting, you might get better out of Matt Thomas. But let's be honest, he's not the key guy. He's not going to be the main focus on this team. So there is an opportunity we could get another spot filled that could be better than what Matt Thomas provides on this team, and that's the direction I would go down. Javonte Green. A very easy one here as well. You have to keep Javonte Green. At the end of the day, he's making a ridiculously decent amount of money, in my opinion. $1 million, $1.8 million, I think, next season for the Chicago Bulls. That's a very good contract for the Bulls, and obviously you're going to have to capitalize on a contract like that. There's no doubt in my mind that after next year, Javonte will be asking for more money. So you could potentially use him as a trade asset down the line, but even if you don't use him as a trade asset, he's a very valuable player for the Chicago Bulls team. One of the more hard-working players on the team, one of the most energetic players on the team, and he constantly moves and he makes defenses, I guess, have to guess what he's going to do. He's that type of player. He's not the best player on the team. He's not the most talented player on the team, but in my opinion, having a combination of talented players and hard-working players is a very good combination to have. So you got to keep your hard-working players, in my opinion, and Javonte Green is one of those players. Kobe White. Most interesting player, in my opinion, to talk about in this conversation, because I can almost guarantee you it will be split on Kobe White, but most people kind of understand the situation that the Chicago Bulls in with Kobe White. Now, if you look at everybody, and assuming everybody will most likely stay on this team, we still have a massive amount of guards on this team. Again, you got guys like Alex Caruso that's definitely going to be here. Lonzo Ball, if Zach LaVine resigns, he's a shooting guard as well, but a guard nonetheless. Ayo Dosunmu, there's a lot of guards on this team, and maybe there's not a spot here for Kobe White to really flourish on this Chicago Bulls team. In all fairness, when it comes to Kobe White, I really do think the Bulls value him, and I would not be surprised whatsoever if he stays here. But I think it's come to that point with Kobe White where a trade could definitely be possible, just so we can get different, I guess, players into this team that maybe suits the positions that we want. We have an abundance of guards. If the guard situation was different, I think Kobe White would probably be here next year. But just so many guards at so many times. We're playing small ball, but we're playing a lot of point guards within I guess it's kind of like a 3-guard system. And the fact that we have Derrick Jones Jr. as a backup center half the time for the Chicago Bulls as well, which is a guy that's, 6'5" at the end of the day, that's a really small lineup, and I think you have to add size somewhere. We do have a draft pick coming up as well that could help. Obviously, we brought in Tristan Thompson later on in the season. That definitely helped in that avenue as well. But you could probably get some assets out of Kobe White in the future. So I think I'm leaning towards trade in this sort of situation. I guess 6 months ago when I made this type of video, I said keep, and I said last year keep as well. But again, the situation is different when it comes to Kobe White. If we keep him, I'm more than happy. Again, I do like Kobe White. I know that's not a popular opinion, but I like Kobe White. I'm intrigued to see what he can do on this team next year if he stays here. I'm hoping that the things that he works on, like ball movement and like dribbling, I should say, and defense and strength, I think they're all key aspects that he does need to look at. But at the end of the day, it's also a situation where we just need other positions, and I think Kobe White probably has more trade value out of some of the other guards that we could trade. He's one of those types of players. He has potential, in my opinion, to be a really great starter in this league, but being a 6th man for the Chicago Bulls, it could work out useful. But at the end of the day, again, other positions are also a priority as well. I'm not sure a point guard is a priority for the Chicago Bulls. We'll have to wait and see. I'm more than happy if he stays here, but I do feel like I'm leaning towards trade this time around. Patrick Williams is next for the Chicago Bulls. Keep. absolutely keep. I don't want to hear that conversation even until now of trading Patrick Williams. At the end of the day, the only way Patrick Williams leaves this team is for a genuine superstar to come back in, and those are few and far between in this league to go and get a superstar caliber player for a guy like Patrick Williams. So at the end of the day, if there's a conversation there, I'm willing to listen to it. But getting a guy like Jeremy Grant, in my opinion, I don't think he's a superstar, and I think we should keep Patrick Williams. So that's the situation I'm with at the moment when it comes to Patrick Williams. Again, risky game when it comes to development. He may flourish. He may end up being, I guess, a bust in terms of the 4th overall pick, and that's a conversation we'll have to have. But I'm not willing to give up on Patrick Williams just yet. I'm not really willing to give up on any of these young guys just yet. Even Kobe White, I don't want to give up on, but if we do have to trade him for something else, I'll understand. It's as simple as that. Ayo Dosunmu, keep as well. No point in trading Ayo or waiving Ayo Dosunmu. At the end of the day, he showed massive development all year long, and I can only imagine how much development he can have with an off-season, a summer league, a pre-season, then obviously a full season ahead of him next year. In my opinion, if he's one of those guys who's going to develop every single time he plays, he's going to be a really great player for this team, in my opinion, and someone that we could potentially trust to hold the reins for the Chicago Bulls in the future. We'll have to wait and see. Nikola Vucevic. In the end, I'm fairly certain I've talked about potentially waiving Nikola Vucevic, and I definitely still say that as an option. But again, I feel like we need to build the team around Nikola Vucevic a little bit more to hide his weaknesses, because his offensive capabilities, when we use them effectively, is one of the best in the league. I think he's a great player to finish around the rim. I think he has a very good mid-range shot, and when he's limiting his three-point shots but making them, he does have that ability as well. But I feel like his weaknesses defensively was very much shined and exposed, and in order to fix those types of areas, you need to help bring people around him so he's not that weakness at the end of the day. So I'd like to see a team around Vucevic that maybe helps him a little bit more. But as I said before, if this team stays exactly the same, player for player the same, then I think Vucevic should get traded. But obviously don't see that's going to happen. I'd like to see Vucevic stay on this team. Tristan Thompson, who we brought in at the end of the season, in my opinion, we should be personally letting Tristan Thompson go. That's the option I would say in relation to the Chicago Bulls. Tristan Thompson's a great player. But at the end of the day, it's more of the value of the contract that I'm worried about here. We don't exactly have the greatest cap space to sign Tristan Thompson for a big money deal. I'm not talking about 20 million or anything like that, but even something as small as $6 million to $8 million a year would be very difficult for Tristan Thompson to get on the Chicago Bulls team. So he does have to think about his salary cap. He does have to think about if he wants to stay here as well. And I think if he wants to stay here, he's going to have to sign a deal he might not like. And that's something that I personally don't see Tristan Thompson doing. I think there'll be many other suitors around the league that will use his veteran leadership and his locker room leadership to full effect. I don't know if the Chicago Bulls will be the team to do that. Alex Caruso, again, we're getting into the situation where most of these are probably going to be keep now. Alex Caruso keep. Again, he's on a multi-year deal. One of the better defenders on this league. Injuries got in the way, but at the end of the day, when he was here, we can clearly see his value. Lonzo Ball, absolutely keep as well. Again, had record-breaking or history-breaking numbers on the Chicago Bulls defensively this year. No question in my mind we should be keeping him. But again, these two guys have to stay healthy. Otherwise, their futures will be in doubt if they cannot have fully healthy years. DeMar DeRozan, again, another player we should keep an MVP caliber season. No reason why we should be getting rid of a player like DeMar DeRozan. Very much the same, where we have to make players, or I guess trade for players to build around him. Simple as that. And then Zach LaVine. I've had my opinion expressed almost every single video when it comes to Zach LaVine. I would love to keep Zach LaVine on a max contract. And at the end of the day, it's not necessarily because I think Zach LaVine deserves a max contract, but look at the free agency targets that are available if you don't sign Zach LaVine. He's far and away, in my opinion, the best free agent in free agency this year that doesn't have a player option or isn't a restricted free agent. It's as simple as that. And all the signing trades I've heard personally for Zach LaVine, I think we lose almost every single one of those trades. There's a 3-team trade that literally doesn't make sense that was on ESPN I think it was a day ago or so, that makes us lose. I think we lose a lot of the sign-in trades. So the sign-in trade has to be quality. It has to be a player that we could get in return that's also seen as a potential superstar going forward. If we don't see that, then I don't know if we win any of the sign-in trades that other teams have to offer. But we've also got to be careful that there are teams that simply just don't need a sign-in trade that can sign Zach LaVine as well. Things are looking very bleak in my opinion. It's not out of the question that Zach LaVine just walks for nothing, and it's also not out of the question that we do have a sign-in trade in which we're forced to lose that trade. But we'll just have to wait and see. Again, assuming Zach LaVine wants to stay here, I want Zach LaVine to stay here and build around this core and see what we can do. At the end of the day, keeping Zach LaVine and putting him on a max contract doesn't mean we can't trade him down the line. That's the kind of direction I'm thinking in as well. We can always trade a guy like Zach LaVine because there will be teams that are willing to give him an opportunity if we don't personally trust what Zach LaVine can do. But for security reasons, I'd like to keep him here just so we can have him here. We can have this score remain somewhat the same. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're new. I know I rushed it a little bit at the end, but again, most of those guys to keep. I don't really need to explain it. But again, Zach LaVine's probably the most controversial one, along with Kobe White and Vucevic. Those are the ones most people probably have the most arguments about. But play along in the comments below. Have a wonderful and safe day. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay tuned for more. Take care and peace.